Good morning, Grace. Glad to have you out, and I see a couple new faces out in the crowd too. And if this is your first time with us, thank you for joining us. Glad to have you to worship our Lord and Savior together. And so, I would like to start off. I need a volunteer, somebody that doesn't mind. Actually, an adult volunteer. I appreciate the hand. But you might not be able to help me. You want to come up? Bring your cell phone with you for illustration purposes. And you may not have had a cell phone, so that might have been what he does. Oh man, of course. Well, yes, yeah. Come on up here. So I kind of want to start out all right. For the example of this illustration, I'm going to lay a couple ground rules here because obviously, when it comes to things like a cell phone, when I say I need a cell phone, I know some people out there and go, you don't need anything cell phone, okay? So let's just suspend that for a moment. Let's pretend that I am in dire need of a cell phone, okay? I'm in dire need. I've got a job interview and I'm waiting and I don't have a home phone. I need something that I can be available at any time. I'm going to need this cell phone, right? Okay. Now, my wonderful friend here, okay, she is going to be able to. Yeah, I noticed something about her. I notice that Sabrina has a cell phone, okay? She has a cell phone. I need a cell phone, right? Now, out of this want and need, that I need a cell phone, you have a cell phone. How can I make that cell phone mine? First, probably the easiest way, maybe the easiest way, or just, without having to do a whole lot of fuss, the easiest way might be to simply, I need a cell phone, right? And I take it. Simple enough, right? I've taken this, and now it's no longer yours. It's now mine, right? Easy enough, okay? Or, what's another way that I turned your light on. What's another way that the cell phone can become mine? No, for it to go from her possession to my possession. To give it, right? She can give it to me. Now, I can take it from her one way. She can give it to me. However, in the giving of it, I can think of two different ways that this can go from her, and for her to give it to me. I can think of two different ways that this could happen. First is maybe the less desirable option of, I could say, Sabrina, or somebody could come to you and say, Sabrina, Christopher really needs a cell phone. I need a cell phone. And honestly, if you're a decent human being whatsoever, or, you know what, I realize you all have a whole lot more money than I have, and you can actually go buy another cell phone to replace the one that you need to give me. And if you're a decent person at all, if you really care about loving me at all, you'll give it to me. Now, you could give it to me that way, right? But what kind of giving will we call that? Just compulsory giving, right? Now, it's interesting. I think in that compulsory giving, did she have to give that to me? No. Now, you don't have to give it to me in that way, right? You can still, but you're giving it to me, but how are you giving it to me? What kind of attitude's behind that?
Guilt.
Maybe guilt, frustration, whatever. A lot of, what'd you say?
Grudgingly.
Begrudgingly? Now, what's a third way that you could give that to me? You see that I have a need. You see, Christopher needs a cell phone. I could, you know what? We do. We have the means to be able to do this, and we have I love him, I care for him, whatever it may be. And you could give it to me how? Kindness, desire, mercy, helping me out, right? Sure. Now, let me ask you a question. All three different ways, and you can go. I think it's good. All three different ways. The same effect happens all three different ways, doesn't it? The cell phone went from her possession to my possession. The first way, I take it from her, right? The second way is given really under compulsion, but if you think about it, if you really think about that way of compulsory giving, is she truly giving it to me? Or in a sense, what am I doing? I'm just finding another way to what? To take it from her. I'm finding just simply another way. I'm either taking dignity from her or whatever it may be. I'm going to add some kind of burden on her that she really just feels the compulsion to give it begrudgingly or whatever. It's just a separate way, right? Another way to take. But if she sees from her own that I'm not bringing it up, she just sees, oh, Christopher has a need. Out of a mercy, out of compassion, out of something from her heart, that she goes, I want him to have that, and gives it. Now, all three situations, the cell phone went from her possession to my possession. But so we'd say the net change is the exact same, right? But is there any difference in those three ways of giving it? There's a vast difference in what happens and how that goes from her possession to mine, isn't there? It makes all of the difference in the world on how it goes over, doesn't it? Now, let me ask you this though. Which of those ways, I'll simplify it on the giving ways. The giving under compulsion or the giving under mercy, desire, whatever. Which one of those is maybe a tougher way to give? And why? I'm curious. Which one of those two givings is a tougher thing to do? And why? This is not a rhetorical. I'm curious. Who thinks the giving under compulsion is a tougher thing? Just show of hands. I see a few. All right. Who thinks giving just because out of mercy and desire to give, whatever, who thinks that's harder? Okay. Those of you who raised the first hand, why? Why did you claim that way is harder? Maybe you're selfish. You don't want to give it up. Okay. I heard what? There's no humbleness in that. What? Yeah, I mean, it's harder because I don't really want to. I'm forced to do it, right? There's, okay, maybe conflict. I don't know who said that. Conflict that comes, right? That's going to come out of that. I don't want to have the conflict about that. What else? Pride, maybe. How about the other side? Who claims that it's harder on the other side of things, giving? Why? Okay, maybe it's yours. Why should I give it, right? What do you think back there? Now I didn't get you for the illustration, but you're going to help me out here. Why? I think that's fair. We're selfish sometimes, right? We just don't want to. Right? Anything else? Any other reason why that would be that way is harder? Oh, you might have to talk to their other person about their need. They may have to actually tell you about their need, right? Oh, gosh. How many of us hate that, right? I know there's a lot of people that hate that. I don't want anybody to know anything about what I need. Sorry, what was the beginning of that? An idleness of heart, expecting somebody else to take care of it. How about from the giver of going, you know what? I don't think they'll appreciate it. Ooh, so I don't want to give it to them. Or I don't think they deserve it. Oh, I don't want to give it for that reason. Now, I don't think there's a right answer to this, but it's interesting when it comes to giving. But let me take you way back. Let's go back a couple months ago, back to Leviticus chapter 25, right? We were, if you remember all the way back to Leviticus chapter 25, there was a year that celebrated every 50 years for the Israelites. What was that year that they celebrated every 50 years? The Jubilee, right? What was the point of this Jubilee? This was the ultimate expression in Israelite religion of doing what? Of giving and caring for your brothers and your sisters, right? This was an entire year of celebration. If you were here, you remember this. If not, or maybe you don't remember, if you weren't around. Basically, this is a year of release. In a sense, anything that happened in the land, say, for example, Don here. He has a farm, and one year the hail comes and his crop is knocked out, or it just doesn't rain on his, it rained on mine. It doesn't rain on his, or a fire breaks out, takes everything, he loses everything. He has no means to take care of himself. So as a good Israelite, a good Jewish brother, I would see his plight, and I would do what? I would help him out. And I wouldn't just simply say, well, sorry. Bad luck when that happened. What you might do, actually, for him to survive, to him take care of his family, I would purchase his land from him. Now, it doesn't mean I would just, hey, I'm going to run your land from you. I can purchase it from you. You need to sell it in order to make it, and that's fair, right? Hey, I mean, that's just how life goes sometimes. It's fair. I purchase it from him, and now it's mine, and I take care of it. And I may even hire him on as a hired helper or whatever to take care of the land, let him stay on it, and if I'm really good, I might take care of him in that way. But ultimately, what's going to happen come every 50 years, doesn't matter if it's 49 years from now, whenever I bought that, or 1 year from now, or anywhere in between, what is to happen at that 50-year mark? I'm to give it back to him. Now, let me ask you a question. Do I sell it back to him? So, if I am not selling it back to him, but I'm giving it back to him to take care of him, to take care, maybe him, or maybe not even him. Maybe Don has passed on in those 49 years. Who am I giving it back to? His kids or his grandchildren. You know, who knows where it happens in that time, right? Because something happened to Don, I'm taking that burden on myself. I'm paying for that, and it comes to a point where I give it back without any recuperation, right? So who takes the cost of the burden of bearing of helping Don out? I do. Does Don pay anything in that? No, not necessarily. Now, he may work. He may become a bondservant. He may have different things in that. But what this time is a release not only to the people, but also to the land to let it sit, to let it rest, to be an ultimate Sabbath, a Sabbath of Sabbaths. To let everything rest, to let everything recuperate, to recover, to restore, to give back everything that might have been lost in that time, right? It gives rest to all who have been burdened, all who have been enslaved to a debt that maybe he can't pay, right? But let me ask you a question. In the giving back, in giving off this back to this Jubilee, was it a matter of taking what you need in order to even things out? Was it on Don to, as a Jew, to go and, you have what I need, and so I'm just going to go and take it from you. I need it, right? You just need to be all right with it, right? This is making things even. I'm going to go take it from you, and then we're beginning to be even, right? No. Does he give under compulsion? Is he supposed to, in the right way, to give completely under compulsion, saying, do I give to him? I have to give to him completely under compulsion, but this is just what I'm supposed to do. I hate to do it, but I guess if that's what I got to do. Is that the right way an attitude? I'm going to take care of my brother? No. Or fear of being punished if I don't do it, fear of being shamed, fear of being put down, or whatever it may be. Or the sense of, well, if you're a good person, you would blank, whatever. Is that the right way to go about it? Let me ask you, in those first two ways, both things are true. He could take from me, or I could give it because I guess I have to, right? Well, this is just it's my burden to bear, I guess, and it's just he just has to take it. Let me ask you a question. If he takes it, or if I just give it under compulsion, who is transformed by that? Anybody? His situation may be he has something, right? He has something he didn't have before, but now he just has something. And what I lack something that I had once before. Lack something that I also paid for at some point, right? Maybe. And now it's just the other way. And now we both walk away. I heard some different things. Bitterness, I heard, just selfishness or whatever it may be. But goods may be exchanged, things may be changed hands, but here's the reality is that nobody's transformed by that, are they? It's just a matter of going through the motions and doing what needs to be done. But if I give because I realize what's been given to me, when I look out and see my brother who has a need, who is being oppressed, who has a burden upon him, what am I doing by going to him to purchase that back and ultimately to give back the land that was his? What am I doing? Is I'm removing a burden off of him in order to restore him back to a place of where he was. I'm releasing him from the burden that sits upon him. It's interesting when we come to this passage that Jesus speaks about. We've been leading up to it. We've seen all the preparation for who he is. We see his temptation to prep him for what's about to come. And then we get into this and we see the very first real teaching of Jesus to people, right? And he turns to a passage in Isaiah 61 that's going to tell about what? The year of Jubilee. The year of release. And we know if we look at verses 14 and 15, these are not the first things that Jesus teaches, right? If you go back in chapter 4, it says, in the power of the Spirit, he returned to Galilee, and news spread about him throughout the surrounding countryside. He began to teach in all of their synagogues and was praised by all. Jesus has been going town to town throughout all of Galilee and preaching. But do we know what his message was of preaching there after his temptation? No, we don't know. The very first thing that we hear from him is what is given here. Where does Jesus come in verse 16 to preach, according to Luke, his first message that we need to hear? He comes to his hometown. He goes to his synagogue. He goes to his people. And when he stands up to read, right, what is handed to him? He's handed the scroll of Isaiah, and he unrolls the scroll, and he finds the place. Jesus looks for a place that he, in his predetermined mind, said, this is what I'm going to preach to the people that know me so well. And he opens up to what we know as Isaiah chapter 61, verses 1 and 2. And he purposely reads from this passage. And this passage is from Isaiah. It's a prophetic thing. It's looking forward to the servant of the Lord, somebody that is going to be the Messiah, somebody that's going to come from Israel, that's going to bring about God's ultimate jubilee, not merely for a land, not merely for things that people own, but something greater than that thing, that jubilee, pointed to a bigger reality of. And Jesus goes on, reads about that, and he says what about this? When he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he's anointed me to proclaim the good news of the poor, sent me to proclaim release to the captives, regaining of sight to the blind, to set those who are free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. And he takes that scroll and he rolls it back up, and he hands it to the attendant, and he goes in good Jewish fashion. He sits down. You would now teach while sitting. And the first thing he says to them is what? What was just read, that prophecy by Isaiah hundreds of years prior, is what? Is happening, is being fulfilled when? Right now. What was true, what was preached about, you've been waiting for is right here, right now, and I'm it. I am fulfilling this. It has been read, it was fulfilled even as you heard it being read. So what is it? What is it that he has come to do? What is it that Jesus is fulfilling in this midst? And I went back and forth. Last week, I told you, I could have preached 4 different sermons on that one, and I decided to do one. This one, I couldn't. I could not do this in one. There's way too much in this one. I'm going to split this up, kind of unpack it in 2 different weeks. But today, what I want to focus on, just from this passage, is I want to focus on mainly one word from this passage. It's used here. It's used twice in this passage. And these are the first 2 times it's used, and throughout the whole of Luke, it's going to be used 34 more times. There's an importance to this. There's a depth to what's going on right here that is going to have reverberations through the whole rest of the book of Luke. And Jesus is saying, this is what my ministry is about. And Luke wants us to know, even though he's preached many times before, right? This is the very first thing that we know that he's preaching. So whatever he says here is going to be foundational for everything that comes in this gospel that's coming after this. It's central. It's a critical thing. And so what I want to do, before we look at what that word is, I want to look at 2 things. I want to look at what is it he's referencing to. And I want to note 2 things. One thing he's missing, that's missing from this quote, but also one thing that he adds to it. Look with me real quick. This comes from Isaiah chapter 61. It'll be up here as well. This is where he unrolls his scroll and he reads this out. Let me read it from Isaiah. Just the first 2 verses. There's a lot more than this too, but we'll get to that more next week. But I just want to kind of hit the context here. He says, the Spirit of sovereign Yahweh is upon me, because Yahweh has chosen me. He has commissioned me to encourage the poor, to help the brokenhearted, to decree the release of the captives and the freeing of prisoners, to announce the year when Yahweh will show his favor, the day when our God will seek vengeance, to console all who mourn. Now it's interesting, real quick, when Jesus read that, he missed something, didn't he? He left something out. Did you notice what he left out? If you could, you can go back and forth. Look at that real quick, and then go back to where he's quoting that in verse 18. What's missing? Jesus left something out. He left out vengeance, didn't he? Interestingly, he stopped this quote mid-sentence, which is fascinating. He stopped the quote mid-sentence. He didn't finish the whole thing. He rolled that sucker back up and gave it back, right? Now, I'm not going to, this is one of those, it's like there's a whole lot more. This part, the second part, go back to that, to the previous in Isaiah, that part about vengeance and what's to come. The reason why I think he skips that, and I'm not going to get into it in depth here, is that part is still yet to come. It's going to be fulfilled, but it's not fulfilled today in their midst. We have to be patient and wait on that. The second thing, though, he added something, didn't he? Do you see what he added to that? There's actually two things. One, though, it's a little trickier. There's one, I'm going to point one of them out. It's an easy one. The whole thing about go back to the Luke passage. The sent and give sight to the blind. Now, that doesn't show up in the Isaiah passage in the Masoretic text. It does show up in the Septuagint, which is the Greek understanding. That one I'm not going to, again, for today I'm not going to focus on. But did you notice one other thing that Jesus added to it that's not in the previous, not in the Isaiah passage? See if anybody noticed this. This one's a tougher one to see. Any guesses? Go back to the Matthew or the Luke one. Anybody notice what he didn't? He gave sight to the blind, so he became released captive to the captives and sight to the blind, set those free who are oppressed. Go back to Isaiah and proclaim the year. To release the captives, freeing the prisoners, to announce the year when Yahweh will show his favor. Do you notice what he added to that? The sight to the blind, we got that. Not like that one is a difference in text issues. Okay, again, another issue, another thing to talk about. There's one other thing he adds though. Release for the what? Go back. It's missing in here. Set free those who are oppressed. You don't see that in the Isaiah 61 passage. Jesus added it. Where did he get that from? Go back 3 chapters in Isaiah. It's very interesting. I want to read the context of this because scholars believe this is exactly what he's doing. And if there's anybody, I guess if it all speaks to him and it's all his word anyway, he has the ability to take these things and rearrange them. But I want you to notice where he pulls this from. In Isaiah chapter 58, I'm going to give you the context. Isaiah is going to be getting on to the Israelites here about what they are and are not doing, okay? Let's read through this in chapter 58, verses 1 through, it'll be 1 through 7. I'll stop along the way. Listen here. It says, shout loudly, do not be quiet. Yell as loudly as a trumpet. Confront my people, God. This is God saying this. Confront my people with their rebellious deeds. Confront Jacob's family with their sin. They seek me day after day. They want to know my requirements. Like a nation that does what is right and does not reject their law of God. That's what they want. They ask me for just decrees. They want to be near God. That's what they desire. But what's the problem? They lament. They say, oh God, why don't you notice when we fast? Why don't you pay attention when we humble ourselves? What's the problem here? They're calling out to God, but they're not receiving what they think they should get from him, right? They say, oh, we want to be close to God. Look, we're fasting, we're humble, we're doing all the right things, God, right? But what's happening? They're not hearing anything, all right? They call out, but they don't receive what they desire. Let's keep reading. Why? In verse 3b through 5. Look at the same time you fast. This is Isaiah saying, hey, okay, yeah, you're fasting. What happens? You satisfy your selfish desires. You oppress your workers. Look, your fasting is accompanied by arguments, brawls, and fistfights. It's interesting fasting, isn't it? Do not fast as you do today, trying to make your voice heard in heaven. Oh, man. Is this really the kind of fasting that I want? Do I want a day when people merely humble themselves, bowing their heads like a reed and stretching out on a sackcloth of ashes? Is this really what you call a fast? A day that's pleasing to Yahweh? God's saying here what? Really? You can't figure this out, guys? You cannot figure out why you're fasting and calling out to me and you're not hearing anything. Really? Just take a look at what you're doing while you're fasting. You may be doing this, but I think your actions show differently, right? Look at verse 6 and 7. No, this is the kind of fast I want. This is what I want your fast to look like. I want you to remove the sinful chains, to tear away the ropes of the burdensome yoke. To what? Set free the oppressed. There it is. And to break every burdensome yoke. I want you to share your food with the hungry and provide shelter for the homeless, oppressed people. When you see them naked, what? Clothe them. Don't turn your back on your own flesh and blood. God says, the type of fasting that I want from you is not a fasting that's just merely going without food, all the while doing all these other things that you know are taking advantage. Notice where is this fasting? We're saying this is between you and me, God, right? But God says, no, the fasting I want is which way? This way. I want true fasting that has a difference in the way that you treat your brother and your sister who's in need. The way that you live that thing out. Fasting is to be accompanied, he says, by mercy. Not only that, but there was, like you said, there it is, right? Set free the oppressed. Jesus adds this term, or this idea right here when he's reading from the scroll. He takes what's in Isaiah 58 and puts it in to Isaiah 61. I think one reason why is I think he wants them to know, if they're familiar with Isaiah, that he goes, this is what you are like. It happened before, it's happening again. He says, what I want from you is what it should be is to release and remove the burden from a brother who's weighed down by it. And let me ask you a question. In Isaiah 58, are the people of Israel doing what they know to be right? Are they fulfilling it? No. Had they been fulfilling it for a long period of time? No. That's why they are in the situation that they're in exile. Now, Jesus knows that they haven't. And I think he adds it to remind them that it still needs doing today. But Jesus says what? Go fulfill it? What does he say? Does he say, go fulfill this and go do it now? Does Jesus say that when he's reading the scroll? He says what? It's been fulfilled by who? By me. Jesus says, I have come to fulfill this pledge, this call to my people. I am the faithful Israelite when all else fails. What I want to look at real quick, I just want to give you the context, but I want to look real quick on that word that comes there. It comes twice in this verse, in verse 18. Like I said, 36 times total in Luke. And it's this word, it's aphesis. A-P-H for those note takers. A-P-H-E-S-I-S. A-P-H-E-S-I-S. For all the note takers out there, I know you are. Aphesis. It's the Greek word for aphesis. It's also in the Greek translation of the Old Testament. It uses the same word. It's used throughout the book of Luke. Often, as we run across it in Luke, we're going to see this word, and it's translated often as forgiveness. Now, when we think of forgiveness, what do we often think of? What do we think of? When you hear the word forgiveness, what do you think of? Letting go of something, not holding it to somebody's account, right? I've used this illustration before. You get pulled over, you're doing 80. The other day, I was on the interstate right over here on 30, and on the access road, I was doing 75. On the access road, there was a guy blowing past us. I was doing 75. He was blowing past us in the 45. So if there had been a car, if there had been a car with some lights on it sitting on that access road, what would have happened to that guy? He'd have gotten pulled over. Why? because he was breaking the law, right? Now, if that cop pulled him over, and we normally think of he's guilty, and the cop says, don't do it again. Just a warning. Keep going on. That's what we often think of as forgiveness, is you were doing wrong, and I'm not going to hold it against you. Now, this word has that aspect to it. But really what this word means is a lot greater than that. Go back all the way to Leviticus in chapter 25 in the Jubilee. Don, if you had lost everything and you have no money, no means to take care of your family, if I just come to you and I say, Don, I forgive you. Cool. We're good, right? I've helped you so much, haven't I? I'm such a good Christian. But how often do we treat forgiveness as that? And we see this and we say, it's just simply, I forgive you. Don't worry about it. You're good. I don't hold that against you. No. To forgive him, to bring him aphesis, to bring him release is to do what? To remove the burden from him, to forgive it, to release him from the thing, everything that comes with the situation that he's in, to remove that from him so he can find freedom, find life, find an ability to be what he needs to be, to take care of whatever it is. Jesus says twice here in this passage to proclaim release, aphesis, to those who are captive, right? And also to aphesis, to set free those who are oppressed. He doesn't merely just say, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. Yeah, you sinned, I don't hold that against you. It's not merely just forgiving of captivity. It's not merely forgiving of oppression, but it's a release from the burden associated with those things. This is the idea. This is a basis for everything that's going to come of understanding the gospel. Jesus said, this is what I came to do. Where do you see forgiveness of sin in this idea here? I don't see it. Do you? Because sometimes we think of forgiveness of sin as just, we think it's everything, but that is part of the means to take that and to release us from a bigger idea that we are a captive people. We are an oppressed people. We are people that cannot live among our own means. This is the good news that Jesus says, I came to take all of that burden from you, not merely just to simply say, oh, you're forgiven of it. Don't worry about it. But I'm going to pull you up out of that place that you were at. Interestingly, let me say this. Jesus' mission, I think, is to remove the burden of sin, to release us not merely from the punishment from it, which we often think, you got your get out of hell free card. Oh, good, I don't have to worry about that anymore. But not just to relieve us from the punishment from that, but from the very captivity, from the blindness that it causes upon us, from the oppression that it brings to us. It's a freedom from everything that sin lays upon us, and he is removing everything of a burden of that. All of the things that come with it, not merely simply don't worry about it. And I think this idea, I wish I could get into this more, but I think this is way too big to unpack. Just even this word, it's going to be used 34 more times. We've got plenty of opportunity. And I know some of you are like, I want it all now. Some of you are like, oh, good, I can't take any more of this. Okay, we're going to have to wait. Because I think that's why we teach the whole of Luke, okay? That's why we're going through the whole book, to reveal it step by step what it means to bring this release to those who are captive. What does Jesus mean when he preaches and he says, this is fulfilled today? We're not going to see it all today. We be patient. We let each step just sink into us. But one thing I do want us to begin to take in this idea of how this release is accomplished by Jesus. And I think this is what sets Christ apart from all other forms, all other claims to pass to God. You want to go to the eightfold path. You want to go to, the following after the Quran. You want to go to emptying yourself and getting to nirvana. Find all these other ways. I think they all have one thing in common, that Jesus, in his way, is vastly and utterly different. And it makes all of the difference in the world, just like what we talked about with the cell phone. It makes all the difference. I think first and foremost, this release from sin and its burden is not done, what? By humanity coming and what? Taking back salvation. There is no earned salvation when it comes to understanding who Jesus is. There is nothing that I can do to come and say, that's mine, I want that, I need that, and I'm going to take it. If that's how you come, you'll find yourself empty. It also does not come from compulsion. Oh, God must do this or else he is whatever. No. Do not simply think that God, if he must do anything except for be just in his holiness to leave us exactly as we are, and he would be vastly just to do just that, because it is not because of him, it is because us as humanity who have turned our backs on him, and he would be completely just to leave us exactly how we are. He is under no compulsion to give this. But what he does is he gives what? It comes out of a mercy. It comes out of a compassion. It comes out of a love, I think, that defines what kind of God that he is. He is a God who sees the captivity and sees the oppression of all humanity. And what does he do? He steps down into that identity, and at cost to himself and no one else, he pays the price that will bring release, that will bring burden removal, that will bring aphesis to a humanity that cannot do it themselves. This is the gospel. And I think what he did not do, he did not make a way for them to do it themselves, in the sense of, hey, here's a little something to make you a little more capable. Now it's on you. I'm going to give you this. Now it's on you. Now you got to take responsibility to finish it off, right? The rest is upon you now. No, Jesus paid the full price of our redemption. And he brings the ultimate jubilee, and he gives it at no cost to us. It cost us nothing. And I think the rest of Luke is going to bring this out, begin to build this out of what it means to see the release that Jesus brings in the gospel. But we need to be patient as we see where it goes. But I want to kind of finish here. I want to think, because this is a lot, but I want us to begin to see, though, what can this mean for us? This idea, this merely is a foundation, I think. Today, what I'm going to say is merely a foundation we build upon as we see the kingdom unfold in this book. As Jesus comes preaching the kingdom of heaven is like unto. He's going to give us an idea of what it looks like in our day-to-day. But I think this, again, is just a foundation, just a start. I think if you look at our world, you look at our country right now, there's a huge problem of mercy. There's an issue of a lot of inequalities in our country, is there not? Flip on the news, you're going to hear the word inequality, inequity. Things are not even. Things are not how they should be. It's nothing new. We just see it a lot more. But I think the world's solution, and unfortunately many of us Christians, our solution is to satisfy the issue of these inequalities, of these lack of mercies in one of the first two ways that we looked at with the cell phone. Is either to say, you need to, the world, and many Christians say, you need to just take it for yourself. If it's not going to be given to you, it needs to be taken, and that will begin to make things right. Or, well, you need to give this under compulsion. If you truly are really this, or if you really want these things, or actually you've had yours now it's the time for, and so you need to give it, or you need to allow it to be taken from you, right? That's what the world wants to see it right now. That's what many Christians want to see it as. Is that it's merely about either giving under, like, oh gosh, I guess I have to, or just, well, it's just going to be taken from me. What does that solve? Nothing. That solves absolutely nothing, because that is not the gospel. All that is trying to even things out in a way that goes just like any other law would be. And so what we do, we put our trust in programs, or we put our trust in the government, put our trust in the right people in the right places that we put in there. They're going to take care of it, right? They're going to make the right laws, and it'll all be fixed. And what can I do? Good. I can step back, and I don't have to take any personal responsibility for it. I'll put those people can take care of it, right? I want the burden off of me to solve it. But when it goes back to the Jubilee, who did God put the burden on to make a difference in the other Israelites' lives? He put it on them. He put it on each Israelite, right? He says to him, he says, I have freely given all of this to you. Remember where you were. You were in Egypt. You were in captivity. You were under a burden. You were a slave. What did I do? I freed you out. And what did I do? I brought you to this land. I gave you all of this. It is all freely yours, and I've given it to you. And he says what? Now I call on you to make a difference in your brother's life. Not by compulsion, not because it's a law to do it. When you understand that the law is not just like we do, don't speed, but it's part of a covenant. It's part of a commitment. It's part of something greater. Think about it with your wife or your husband. Is it a very good marriage when you live by law? This is what you have to do. Anybody? Anybody have a good marriage that lives their life off of this is what you have to do or else? But there are laws in a sense, right? There are things that hey, if I want this to be a good relationship, I'm compassionate, I care, I submit, I show mercy, I give of myself. There's so many things that are a law unto themselves, but they come out of a relationship, out of love, right? God says, I don't want you to do it out of compulsion. I want you to do it because of mercy. You see the plight of your fellow image bearer, whether that be a believer or not. They are image bearers, and you, out of your compassion, you remove the burden, you release from oppression, you set free from their captivity. You bring aphesis to other people. Why? Or actually, before I even say that, before the why, and do it, bring that freedom, that release, at cost to who? Myself. If I want to bring that release, it's going to cost me something. If there is a debt that is owed to somebody and I release that debt, it cost me because I gave the money in the first place to then let it go, right? It's a cost. But God says, I paid the cost for you to release you. Now I call upon you to do the same for others. He's not calling us to do anything he himself hasn't done in an infinitely greater way than anything we could ever pay. I think this is my big idea, and I'm going to close up with this. The big idea here is that I believe that Jesus' ministry of merciful release is the basis for both the gospel and our pattern of righteous living. We're going to unpack this more next week. I didn't get any. The only thing I really looked at is one word used twice. I want to look at this more next week, but I think for today it's enough. My desire is that we would be a church that's characterized by this idea of aphesis. This idea of a people that release those around us who are desperately in need of mercy, of removing burdens off of other people when they are oppressed and beaten down by it, both in our congregation and outside of it. I'm not worried. I'm not talking about national laws. I'm not talking about all these things. I'm talking about starting right here. We'll let the other things worry about themselves as we begin to change here. But how do we do that? We do it by removing the burden of sin through gospel proclamation. First and foremost, we remove the burden of sin upon people that are dying without hope in this world through the proclamation of the gospel of Jesus Christ. But also daily, we take off the burdens of life through merciful giving, through our time, through our resources, to bring a freedom and bring a true equality to our neighbors. Amen. I want to close with that. I want to bring up, before we have the worship team, though, I want to bring up Tristan Hayden. You come up here. Tristan is going to be going to Oaxaca, Mexico. Some of you all, come up here. Some of you know this. Tristan's one of our, he just graduated this past year from in our youth group. His family is a part of this church. They're members here. And Tristan has felt a call of God to go and begin to do that, to be mercy, to be a person that goes out and brings release to those around him. He's going down to Oaxaca, Mexico for what, 6 weeks?
7.
7 weeks to work with a family down there, to do a ministry, to bring the gospel and to bring just this idea of this mercy ministry to others. And we want to pray for him. I want to praise you all too, because of your generosity, because you're giving it to him. Some of you may not be able to go to that. May not be able to. He is able to. He's young. He's got energy, right? He doesn't have a full-time job right yet. He can leave. No, I appreciate it. No, I'm just kidding. But no, he's able to go do that. And because you all were very merciful to him and giving to him, he has more than enough to go. And he can use what else he has, yes, to be a benefit and a blessing to others. And I'm excited for his heart. I'm excited for, I am. I'm excited that you want to do this, that you want to be Jesus to those others. You want to live out what he talked about today, that Jesus is the one who fulfills that, but we, in light of that, we begin to live that out in others. And I want to pray for you, and I'm going to close up our sermon as well. But pray with me if you want to, and then we'll bring up the worship team.